My name is Jim Dukovic, and I served in the United States Army, particularly in the field artillery. Then later, the highest rank I attained in the Army was a robust PFC, but later I did get a commission in the Air Force in ROTC at Penn State. In the field artillery, the duty is usually to support the actions of an infantry division. In our case, and I'll tell you this part in the later story, we got into the military late. So our duties primarily were in the Battle of the Bulge, gathering up the prisoners of war and herding them into a cage and making sure they stayed there until we had a chance to process them. So my basic duties in the military was guard duty. Well, it all started in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as I was inducted into the service. And the interesting introduction in that my cousin, who was also in a different draft board, went in at the same exact time, and ended up in Indiantown Gap. That was the induction center at that point. What we happened to have happen then was a big factor in my military experience. His train, at the end of our induction period, went to the infantry. For whatever reasons the fates determined, my train went to the field artillery, and thus may have saved my life. He went immediately after basic training into the Battle of the Bulge. In a particular event, he climbed out of a foxhole with a bazooka and took out a tank that was coming down to annihilate his unit, proceeded to win the Silver Star, second highest rank in the military, and highest rate in the military by the way of an award. My situation, we went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina to do familiarization firing for Officers Candidate School. So I then, after that, went to Europe, to the latter part of the Battle of the Bulge. And at that point, we were gathering up prisoners of war and herding them into a field that maybe a week before was some farmer's field, where the Corps of Engineers put up a very hasty barbed wire fence, and we were instructed to keep the people on that side of the fence. That turned out to be a very enlightening experience, and you can't help but have compassion at that point for the poor souls who in mid-March were the only things they could carry into that cage. The battle, the weather, the rain, the snow, and they were the young Germans, the kids, and they were the old men. At that point, that was about all Hitler had left to recruit. So this was a rather interesting phase in my life. And fortunately, very fortunately, they were like whip dogs and didn't try to go through, over, or under that fence. So fortunately, we never had to shoot anyone. And that I look back at one of the great blessings of my life, believe it or not. So after the Battle of the Bulge, we left Europe. Before that, I was transferred into the unit that had the worst record in the history of the United States military, including the Civil War, the 106th Division. They felt the brunt of the German onslaught in the Battle of the Bulge. They were spread out thin on the line, and they were simply overrun, killed or captured. So we were replacements to that unit. Shortly thereafter, then, and we saw no action with them other than the guard duty that I mentioned. We were transferred into the 28th Division, which is the Pennsylvania National Guard, and came back after the war ended in Europe. By good fortune, I was on recuperative leave in Pittsburgh when the event that changed everything dramatically occurred. The bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. There's an interesting little anecdote that goes with that story. I had a very good friend in the service of the Boy Scouts of America, Mickey McAllister, and on one occasion he mentioned to me that his brother-in-law had saved his life. How, I inquired. He was getting ready for the initial invasion of Japan, as I was in Pittsburgh at that point. His brother-in-law was the navigator on the Enola Gay that flew the sortie that landed the bomb in Hiroshima. So he may have saved my life as well as Mickey's. The casualty list would have been anticipated in the million. The war over, we now went to Texas for a short period of time, and following that we had a train ride up the coast to Fort Lewis, Washington, and therein were we discharged. The look back to the military experience, I can only say was a positive experience in my life. Besides seeing the world, I went into the service as a boy and came out a man. And in addition to that, I had the reward of a college education. So I thank the good Lord for my good fortune.